Introducing ourselves, beginning on my left.
Dan Beret, Zoning Enforcement Officer.
Ashley Majorowski, Land Use Administrator.
Deborah Pazzetti, Secretary.
Bruce Tyler.
Chantel Foster.
Carolyn Freeman.
Bob Ellsworth.
Okay, next order of business is to accept the agenda. I'd like to make several changes in the agenda. First of all, I'd like to omit item 6, which is the discussion of plan of conservation and development. And secondly, to move all items 5 through 10 to before the public hearing. I'm assuming the public hearing will take the most time, and these other things are pretty quick. So can I have a motion to accept the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, the agenda is amended, is approved. First order of business is a request for waivers to regulations for public improvements to Portland Town Park. This is mostly a courtesy motion because the town has exempted itself from zoning regulations. So, do we have that motion?
I have it.
Go ahead.
Read it. To approve request for waiver of minimum tangent length between horizontal curves, 7E.1, minimum radius of center line curvature, 70E.1, and minimum spacing of intersections between center line 70G.1 of the regulations for public improvements for the Portland Town Park, request of Weston and Sampson, property of Town of Portland, Assessors Map 58, Lot 32, Gospel Lane, and Map 59, Lot 49, Cox Road, Zone R25. Reason, the proposed realignment of Strickland Street meets the design criteria to the maximum extent practicable while reducing the wetland impacts below 5,000 square feet.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, the motion passes. Next order of business is to distribute the 2018 adopted meeting schedule. We already have that. Everybody have that in their packages?
Yes.
Next order of business is staff report.
There is none.
Next order of business is public comment, but this is not comment about the hearing. This is comment about anything else. This is going even faster than I thought. Okay. Next order of business is the approval of minutes of October 12th. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I wasn't here.
Oh, second.
All right. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right. The minutes of October 12th are approved. That was easy. That's all the other business. Next, so now we're back to item 4, which is application 17-06, Main Street, Marlborough Street, and west side of Perry Avenue. Special permit request for a proposed mixed-use development, Assessors Map 19 and 20, lots 68 to 71 and 16 to 25, zones B2 and B3 in the Town Center Village District. Application of BRT DeMarco, PTP, LLC. It says, see attached list of property owners. I don't care about that. We won't bother that. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing on that? Yes.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay. The public hearing is now open on this. Before we start, people who want to speak need to come up to the microphone because this is being filmed and it's also going to be online. You can stream online. Let me describe the procedure for you a little bit. First thing is, I'll ask the applicant to make his or her, in this case it looks like their presentations. All right, following it, members of the commission will ask any questions or make any comments that they wish to make. Following that, members of the public will be able to do the same thing. And everybody who wants to speak will get a chance to speak, but remember, come up to the lectern to do that. If we find that we can't complete everybody's comments in the meeting tonight, then we will continue this until the next meeting. Remember, much of this is controlled or stated by state regulation. So if we do some weird things, it's not because we like to be weird, but because the state requires us to be. Any questions or comments? Okay. So I've read the application. Who is here to speak on behalf of the application? Please. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's good to be back with
Would you mind stating
Plans?
your name for the record?
yep, Dan Bertram, principal with BRT DeMarco PTP LLC. So we're here tonight to continue a conversation we started a couple years ago with the town, and we know that this is a important site to the town of Portland, and we've certainly got to know a lot of people in this room as we've worked on it over the last 2+ years. So what we have tonight is a series of presenters where we'll start with civil engineering, take you through kind of the hows of the site, how it all fits together, works. We'll go to landscape architecture, we'll present traffic, and then we'll spend a fair bit of the time on architectural types of things. We have 3 different resources on that. We've got Paul and Alan, who are here tonight, from both working on the commercial buildings, the integration of the historic, and finally, Paul will be speaking to a firm of ours that we use out of Dallas called Humphreys and Partners for the residential component. So I will make some closing comments, but other than that, that's kind of what we have laid out, and I think we'll just get started if you're good to go with Steve. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Steve Sullivan from CCA Engineers. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut. I'm going to start off by describing the existing site conditions and then go into the proposed site development plans.
Excuse me, is there any way you could speak into the microphone?
Can I take this off? Okay. The site is located with frontage on Marlborough Street, Main Street, and Perry Avenue. Perry Avenue is on the east side of the site development. It's currently home to the vacant Elmcrest Hospital, the 3 historic structures, the Sage House, the Hart Jarvis, and the Brainerd House. Sage being located closer to Main Street. Hart Jarvis is kind of centered in the portion of the property, and Brainerd is to the east of the Hart Jarvis. In addition, the property, the proposed development contains 14 single-family home properties that are located along Perry Avenue. The site consists of about 14.9 acres. It's located in the B2, the B3 business zones, as well as the town center village district. The topography of the site is relatively flat to moderate sloping. It slopes to the southeast and southwest from Main Street. There is no wetlands on the property. Site soils consist of hydrologic soil type B, which is a good well-draining soil. So now I'll start talking about the proposed development. Sure.
Nobody can see that because lecterns in the way.
Okay. Do you want to put it up? Can we put it? Yeah, it's all loaded up on the screen. Try to. see the laser. Yeah, I'll see what- Okay. So this is a Brainerd Place, a mixed-use development. There'll be 5 new buildings proposed and 3 existing buildings, historic structures, to be restored. Building A, located on the south side of the property, that is a proposed office retail building. Building B, located closest to Main Street, is a proposed pharmacy, a drive-through pharmacy. Building C is the Sage House, proposed as a restaurant. Building D is to the east of Sage House, and that is a coffee shop. Building E, located at the corner of Perry and Marlborough, and that is an residential apartment building. Building that contains 101 apartments. Okay. Building F is located to the south of E, and that's the second residential apartment building containing 139 apartments. Building G, located to the west of Building E, is the Brainerd House, and that'll be restored, and that will be an amenity building for the residential apartment buildings. Between Brainerd House and Building E is a proposed pool for the use of those two residential apartment buildings. Last building is Building H, which is the Hart Jarvis, which will be relocated to the southwest corner, right adjacent to the Town of Portland property, which has frontage on Main Street. Main access to the site would be from Marlborough, kind of centered in the middle of the development, proposing a new traffic signal and road improvements along this section of Marlborough. We're proposing a right turn in and right turn out only onto Main Street. And then we have 2 gated driveways on Perry Avenue, which is only for emergency access. There'll be no regular use of those 2 driveways for users of the site or residents of the site. There is 804 proposed parking spaces. 252 of them will be located on the bottom level in parking garages below buildings E and F. 24.5% of the property is building coverage. 74.7% is impervious coverage. 80% is the max according to the regulations, and 25.3 would be green space. As part of the MUD mixed-use development regulation, Section 9.17.5A allows for the request of waivers to certain regulations. They are located on our layout plan, but I'll go through them real quick. The first one is to Section 7.33, access from Main Street to a drive-through service. That's the proposed drive-through pharmacy, where we have the pickup window in the rear of the building. We feel the proposed right in and right out allows for good site circulation from a traffic standpoint, also access for emergency vehicles and delivery trucks. The next section is that we're requesting a waiver to, or a slight reduction to, is 8.2, is the parking calculation. We're requesting a 4% reduction below the required parking. It's basically related to the apartment buildings. We're basing the parking calcs based on national standards for these types of buildings and these types of unit mixes. We've built the applicant has built this building in Brookfield, and we use the same unit count and parking calc, and it works out well for those unit mixes.
Does your plan show that 4% reduction in parking?
Yes, it's listed in the table on the layout.
I mean, in the design. In other words, what was it, 810 parking places you said?
804.
804.
Yep.
Okay. Is that with the reduction or without?
That's with the reduction.
Thank you.
Yep. Next section is 8.2.6C, which is landscape strips between tiers of parking. essentially, the areas that would consider this is east of Building F and between Building A and B. We do have landscape islands. We felt a landscape strip would cause issues with the layout of traffic coming in and out, trying to align the drive-through and the other driveways into those parking areas. That same request was granted on the previously approved application several years ago. Next waiver would be 8.2.6.E. That's the requirement for an 8-foot fire lane. That's basically the striped fire lane with no parking. We're proposing the 3-foot stripe with no parking signs. Based on our experience, that's been the norm for striped no parking fire lanes.
Have you read the memos by the fire marshal and the fire chief?
Yes, I have. Yep.
And you believe that proposal, that waiver is consistent with those?
Yes, we have listed that waiver on the layout materials plan, yes.
Okay.
And we would answer all those comments in writing as well. Next one is section 8.1.2, a buffer along Main Street. That's required when you adjoin a residential zone or residential buildings. I brought this up at the actual pre-development workshop, and across the street there actually is no single-family homes across the street, so I don't think we need this waiver, but I haven't heard back from anybody in the town yet regarding whether it's applicable or not. But in our opinion, that buffer is not required due to across the street not being a residential zone or single-family homes. Section 5.5 is building setbacks. Waiver to building C to the building setbacks, basically because it's pre-existing. It's there now, and based on the MUD setback regulations, it would not meet that. But so that's one waiver. And the other one is building H, the relocated Hart Jarvis. That's located in the southwest corner. We situated that to align with the town of Portland property. The original plan had a smaller Hart Jarvis, but since we met last time, our architect and a nonprofit group were talking about incorporating the whole footprint of Hart Jarvis, and so we had to revise the plan and fit that into that corner. The last waiver request is 9.17.5 regarding the ratio of residential units to percentage of commercial units. Phase 1, we're proposing 42% residential and 20% commercial. What that entails is the construction of building E, and then the construction of building B, D. Let's get the restoration of the Brainerd Place, the restoration of Sage, and the relocation of Hart Jarvis, and building B as well. So that would be the last request. Our landscape architect is going to talk about the landscaping. There's going to be a sign waiver request as well, but it hasn't made the plan. That'll be on the next iteration. But I'll continue on with the site plans. Next is the grading and drainage. Pretty exciting stuff. Basically, we have a series of catch basin systems that collect surface runoff from the site and discharge it to what we call hydrodynamic separators. They're water quality units. From there,
We can't see this. You've got to make
Sure.
things are up there.
can you, we'll have to just open that plan up. So we have, from a grading standpoint, I'm just going to refer to here. We're keeping the grades essentially draining to the same location they are today, from the north to the southeast and southwest. But in order to accommodate all the buildings and driveways, we have several retaining walls, about 5 retaining walls located at various locations along the site. From a drainage perspective, we have a catch basin system that goes into water quality units and then discharges into underground gallery systems, 3 of which would be allow for infiltration or recharge of runoff.
So you're proposing to put in retaining walls rather than regrade?
We're doing both. We're regrading and there's proposed retaining walls.
Isn't the grade from front to back something like 36 feet?
Yeah, so basically on the south side, we have a wall adjacent to the self-storage property that ranges in height from basically 1 foot to, what was that? 10 feet at its highest, okay?
Okay.
From the gallery systems, we'll connect into drainage on Perry Avenue. Most of the site, the far majority of the site, will connect into the existing easement that's located on the neighboring self-storage facility. There's an existing drainage pipe that will be upgrading in size, but utilize that same route to convey the drainage.
So your preference is to create more drainage rather than reduce the amount of impervious surface?
Well, we're below the impervious coverage.
No, I understand. I understand what the regulations are.
Right.
I'm asking you about from an architectural point of view.
Yeah, right now it's proposed as bituminous concrete, paving, and sidewalks.
Okay.
Okay. Obviously, this drainage system will have to get reviewed by the DOT as part of a OSTA permit application. Moving on to sewer and water. If you want to switch that, Nick. So we're proposing to extend the sewer through that easement that's located on the self-storage property. There's an existing sewer line there. We'll pick up that sewer line and route it through the proposed development. All the buildings will discharge into that sewer main, except for E and F. We're proposing to have each of its own sewer laterals out to Perry Avenue. From a water standpoint, we are going to extend the water main from the lower Main Street area, as was proposed at by the last applicant for the previous development, and run it up Main Street. And we'll propose to enter our site just south of the pharmacy building. From there, we'll route it through the site, serving each building, and we're going to loop it into the Perry Avenue main. In addition, we're proposing to bring natural gas to the site from the east side of the site near Pickering Street and over to Perry, and then enter into the site from there. Could you go to the erosion sheet, Nick? Nope, back one. Okay. Erosion controls, they consist of your geotextile sediment fence, construction entrances, catch basin silt sacks, and the meat of the erosion control plan would be the 3 temporary sediment traps, which collect construction runoff and let it filter out before it discharges into the nearby drainage systems. In order to get construction runoff to these sediment traps, there are some diversion swales, temporary diversion swales and berms to divert the water to these low-lying areas. We have included in the package a photometric lighting plan. It's probably the last one, Nick. It consists of all the foot candles. In the development report, we have a manufacturer's cut sheet of a LED light pole. We're proposing the light source to be 27 feet above finished grade. So I encourage the commission to take a look at that fixture and welcome any comments you may have. I'd like to just jump back actually to the layout plan, if you will, Nick, or the presentation plan. I forgot to mention we have a lot of sidewalks that provide good connectability between all the buildings. It's the other file, Nick. So we have sidewalks throughout the site that provide good connectability between all the buildings and the street. In addition, we have several benches throughout the site and bike racks throughout the site. And we have the main green space is just north of the Brainerd house, which shows a proposed gazebo. When I hand it off to the landscape architect, he'll talk about some of the landscaping we had proposed there. But we feel that's a nice feature for the development. So with that, I'll hand it off to the landscape architect, and then we'll continue on with the. You want to do it after?
No, you can't. You get a chance to do that once we turn the hearing over to you guys.
Good evening. For the record, Nick Ushjak, Registered Landscape Architect, CCA Engineering in Brookfield. Before you is a colored version of our site plan that you have seen. We are preserving a great number of existing trees on the site, starting with the northwest corner, in particular where Marlborough and Main Street intersect. There's a large stand of existing trees. And keeping this frames and serves as a backdrop for a new sitting area that we're locating off of Marlborough Street. And in addition to that, there's a large existing sassafras at the corner of the Sage House. As you're coming up to the intersection, this is a prominent feature that we are preserving. Moving down to the southwest corner, setback from Main Street, along the property line is a row of existing trees, mostly deciduous trees. There's a few evergreen trees, and we will be providing tree wells to accommodate the grading to preserve these trees. And anywhere where there's gaps, we'll be filling in with additional evergreen trees. Moving back to Marlborough Street, moving eastward, we're providing a solid screen of evergreen trees at the coffee shop, at the drive-up window. And this continues until the main site entry. At this site entry, as you're coming into the site entry on the right-hand side, or what would be the west side of the entry, we're preserving a 48-inch beech tree. And around this beech tree, we're providing a large island to protect the root system. And this is very important to ensure the survival of that tree. And as you face the left-hand side or the east, we have the Brainerd house. And in front of the Brainerd house, facing Marlborough Street, there's a number of existing trees that we are saving. There's a dogwood tree. There is a twin magnolia. There's a group of spruce trees. And in doing so, we're keeping the historic facade of that building. And it's also serving as a backdrop to the amenity area where the gazebo is, and the we have bench seating in that area. In addition to that, it's functioning to separate the front amenity area from the new pool area to the south. So in addition to that, at the rear of the Brainerd house, we're creating a large island, even larger than the one for the beech tree, and this will encompass a magnificent oak tree. It's about 60 inches plus in diameter, from what I could tell. And right next to it is a large ginkgo tree. It's multi-stem. This whole area is surrounded by ground covers. There's a bench, there's a millstone, a carriage block. So we'd like to preserve that area as part of the combined framework and backdrop for the main entry, the Brainerd house, and separating the parking area over to the east from the other use areas to the west. We are proposing a large number of deciduous trees. These are shade trees, they're as opposed to evergreen trees. And these populate the entire site. They're basically in parking lot islands and the rest of the green spaces. And these function to provide shade throughout the site and define various use areas in the site. What you see on the plan here, the size of those trees depicted is approximately what the spread of these trees would look like at planting or a few years later. Ultimately, these trees will spread and knit together. We have planted varied size plants depending on the use areas. For instance, lining the access roads and linear islands. We'll be using medium spread trees. They'll probably get to be about 25, 30 feet in spread. At the end islands, we'll use medium-sized trees where space permits. And in the islands where we have tighter conditions, we'll specify columnar trees. So in all cases, the species chosen will fit the area. Like for instance, in the larger lawn areas, we'll be specifying trees that might get to be ultimately 50, 60, 75 feet in spread. In front of the residential building along Marlborough Street is a row of shade trees, and ultimately when they grow and knit together, they will form a beautiful foreground for the building facade. And in all areas, the shade trees will be accented at intervals by flowering trees, understory trees, to add some variety, particularly at building entries and building corners. The perimeter site will be primarily planted with evergreen trees, and this will create a solid visual screen. They will be staggered within the buffer to allow for more planting, more variety in spacing. In many cases, we're providing well up to 15 feet of a buffer. We'll be using varied species and heights. In addition, these will be accented with, once again, with flowering trees, so that you'll have evergreen trees as a backdrop, and then you'll have color in front. Now, we'll be concentrating in key areas, like I said, at the intersection of Main Street and Marlborough, along the coffee shop, and in particularly along Perry Avenue to buffer the residential areas to the east. Also, we're using evergreen trees to screen refuse areas and loading areas and separate parking areas, in particularly between Building A and the residential apartments to the southwest. In the next iteration, there will be a signage waiver requested, and that will be for section 8.4.2K.2, and this will be to allow directory signs, one at each entrance at Marlborough Street and Main Street. Maximum height shall be 16 feet versus 12 feet. Maximum width shall be 12 feet versus 8 feet. Horizontal panel area not to exceed 8 square feet versus 4 square feet. And this shall apply to each face of a double-sided directory sign. Any questions?
Well, I have a question of the row of evergreens that you have along Perry Avenue. Are these going to be planted in grass, or there's going to be beds, and will there be other things in there as well as just the trees, or just?
Well, they're not. It will be. There is a slope there, so they will be planted in the grass on a slope. Yes, and they are varied heights. You know, rather than have one long column of trees that are 6 feet high, and we'll have some that are 6, some that are greater than that, and different species to mix it up. In addition to the flowering trees that we're locating in there.
I'm sure we'll have a bunch of questions for you all at once, but
Okay.
we'd like to run through the presentation and then ask for a question.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
I guess I'll just talk. All right, good evening. For the record, my name is Joe Balskis. I am a Director of Transportation Systems for VHB. I'm a 27-year resident of Portland. Been involved with this commission itself actually 20 years ago as an alternate member, so I know it's the side of the table you're sitting on. Been doing traffic studies for a number of years, and I'm here with my associate Charlie Baker, who's going to give the details of the traffic presentation. I want to say a couple things about the traffic study itself that was submitted. We also submitted today information to the, you heard the word OSTA before, OSTA, the Office of State Traffic Administration. So the DOT owns Marlborough Street Route 66 as well as Main Street Route 17. So we have to go through a process with the Office of State Traffic Administration because the development meets the threshold, the size of the development. So we'll be going through them as well for approval of this development and the mitigation that will be proposed on Marlborough Street as well as on Main Street. So just want to start with that process at the beginning. The intent is to try and do it in parallel. This process here, site plan approval with you, and get comments from you as well, and then meet with the DOT and OSTA, talk about the application, and then really focus on the off-site improvements that Charlie will talk about on Main Street and on Marlborough Street. So just so you know, that process goes on. Once we get approval from the town, we then go to OSTA for the final approval from OSTA. They cannot approve anything until the town approves it, so we can't like tell them what to do. It's basically they wait for the town approval, and then we get the actual approval. But we'll be doing the process together, if you will. Comments here tonight from the public as well as from the town and staff, and we'll incorporate those as we proceed with the application with the Office of State Traffic Administration. So just real quick, I'm very familiar with this. Obviously, being a resident 27 years, been through this intersection, daily, know it very well, know the roads very well. Charlie lives in East Hampton, so we're local boys. We know the area pretty well. We understand it, and we did I think a very detailed traffic study, and I'll let Charlie go through that brief presentation before we get to the real part of the show, the architecturals.
Thank you. As Joe mentioned, I'm Charlie Baker. I'm a traffic engineer with VHB, and I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'd just like to give a very brief overview of the traffic impact study and our results that we did for this study. The primary objectives of the traffic study were to evaluate traffic conditions on the proposed driveways, as well as the potential impacts the project may have on the surrounding road network. As Steve mentioned, access to the site will be provided by a full access driveway on Marlborough Street. This driveway is located a little to the west of the existing curb cut into the site. So this will require some modifications to provide, adjust this center median to shift the left turn lane into our site. And we're proposing to construct a traffic signal at that location. The other driveway is the right in, right out driveway out onto Main Street. So in addition to the two driveways, the study area for this impact study included the three closest signalized intersections along Marlborough Street, at Main Street, and then further to the east at High Street and Airline Avenue, and then the intersection with the Tri-Town Plaza driveway. So to evaluate current traffic conditions in the area, we collected traffic count data at each of these intersections during the weekday morning, weekday evening, and Saturday midday peak periods. And then we projected those volumes 2 years into the future to evaluate future traffic conditions when the development would be expected to be open. We looked at both background traffic volumes from just background sources of traffic growth, population, changes in demographics, as well as any specific planned developments that are proposed in the area other than this one to evaluate what traffic conditions would be like in the future under no build conditions without this development. And then we compared those traffic conditions to what traffic would be like in the future with this development, which we'd call the build condition. So in order to forecast the additional traffic generated by this development, we used the industry standard ITE trip generation manual, which contains formulas based on similar land use data collected at similar sites throughout the country. And based on this data, the proposed development is expected to generate 620 new trips per hour during the weekday morning peak, 697 trips per hour during the evening, and 765 new trips per hour during the Saturday peak. Those numbers include both vehicles entering and exiting the site. So one vehicle entering the site and then exiting the site later would count as 2 trips. Just to help put those volumes into context, that would be about 10 to 12 vehicle trips per minute during the highest peak hour of every day. And then obviously there would be lower volumes throughout the rest of the day outside the peak periods. So some of you may be familiar with a previous development that was approved by the town on this site in 2009, but was never built. We reviewed the traffic study for that previous development just for comparison, and the previous traffic study said that other development would have generated about 1,200 trips per hour during the peak. So this current proposal generates about half the traffic as the previous proposal that was considered on this site. So once we'd projected the future traffic volumes, we did capacity analysis at each of the study intersections using industry standard software to evaluate the potential project impacts. Capacity analysis are typically reported in terms of level of service, which is a letter grade assigned similar to a report card. A through F, that just evaluates the overall intersection performance and delay. Level of service A through D is typically considered to be acceptable, and whereas E and F are typically considered to be overly congested conditions. And these capacity analysis results indicate that the proposed driveways both operate at acceptable levels of service B or better during the peak traffic conditions. And the 3 signalized intersections on Marlborough Street to the east of the site are also all operating at level of service B or better. So the intersection that we really focused on in our traffic study is the intersection of Main Street and Marlborough Street. The analysis results indicate that that intersection is currently operating at level of service C, which is typically considered to be acceptable. But again, we are very familiar with this area, and we do know that There are issues on the westbound Marlborough Street approach. There are relatively long delays in vehicle queuing on that approach, particularly during the morning peak hour, as motorists are trying to get to Middletown, go over the bridge. Vehicle queues do back up on that approach. So we tried to look at some improvements we could do to mitigate traffic conditions at that intersection. And I'll just pull up a board for you.
Are you going to talk about pedestrian traffic as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, it's the other PDF that's open. Okay, so if direct your attention to the screen, north is to the right on this screen. So this is Main Street, this is Marlborough Street, and this corner right here is our project site. So one of the key issues we were trying to fix at this intersection, as I mentioned, there are long delays in vehicle queuing on Marlborough Street, and there's also an issue of currently there are only 2 through lanes in each direction on Main Street. There's no left turn lanes. So sometimes when a vehicle is waiting to turn left from Main Street onto Marlborough Street, he obstructs through traffic along Main Street. So the fix we're proposing is to widen Main Street on the east side of the road, where you can see hatched in red here, and then restriping the road to provide a southbound left turn lane onto Marlborough Street, so that when vehicles are turning left to get onto Marlborough Street, they're not blocking through traffic anymore. One of the benefits of doing this is basically that it increases the capacity of the intersection, so we can afford to retime the intersection and take away some of the green time from Main Street and add it to Marlborough Street. So we're effectively increasing the capacity and reducing delays at the intersection as a whole.
Isn't that going to increase your costs a lot, since the right-of-way on the east side is not owned by the state?
I believe we do have sufficient right-of-way to do this widening.
You sure? Okay.
Yes. It is more costly than the other alternative we actually considered. We did consider widening on the west side of the road instead. However, we know that the town has recently done streetscape improvements there, and based on discussion with town staff, we know that that's not desirable. We don't want to rip those up, so we're doing the widening on the east side instead.
Okay.
The other improvements, as you mentioned, we're looking at how to improve pedestrian accommodations in the area. We do know that that is a concern in the town. So one of the improvements we're proposing is to install pedestrian signals for this Marlborough Street crossing. Currently there is pedestrian signals and push buttons for crossing Main Street, but there's nothing there for Marlborough Street. So we can just add pedestrian signals and push buttons to allow a safer crossing of Marlborough Street. And then the other improvement we're looking at is for this channelized right turn lane from Main Street onto Marlborough Street. It has a very large radius that encourages high speeds around that corner. And we've heard from talking to residents and just from driving through the intersection that vehicles generally have trouble. There's poor visibility of pedestrians, and generally when motorists do see pedestrians, commonly they don't yield to the pedestrians. So we're recommending the installation of RRFBs, which are pictured here. That stands for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. That's essentially these flashing beacons that are attached underneath the pedestrian warning sign. There would be one that goes on both sides of the road. And on the pole, there would be a push button that can be actuated by pedestrians. So whenever a pedestrian pushes that button, those lights flash. There's been a lot of research that suggests that those flashing beacons increase visibility of pedestrians, and they increase driver yielding behavior. So hopefully some of the issues that we have right now with a pedestrian waiting to cross and just cars continuing to fly past them, this would hopefully help with that, because it'd be much more visible, and motorists seeing the flashing beacons would stop and allow the pedestrians to cross.
You're saying that making the road wider, you're talking about making the road wider up there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's hard to tell in this image. The red hatched areas along this side, that would be the limits of widening. I believe it's about a 4-foot widening that we would do, and then restriping the pavement so that we can have 2 lanes in each direction, and then room for this left turn lane here. But
I was talking about the piece that's up there.
Oh, yes. Yes. We think we'd extend the widening a little bit further back This piece right here is just to provide a little bit of a deceleration lane before you get into there. Right now, it's essentially going from just 2 through lanes, and then it just branches off without any kind of deceleration lane. With just a little bit of widening, it allows vehicles to kind of get off to the side, get out of the through lane before going into the channelized turn lane. So we think that the improvements at this mitigation, at this intersection, will mitigate the impacts of the proposed project. And with these improvements, the intersection is expected to operate at the same overall level of service under future conditions with the additional traffic from the development as it does today. And again, with the pedestrian improvements, we feel this is a much safer condition than we have today as well. So the other improvements we're recommending in the area, as Steve mentioned, we are proposing a traffic signal at the main site driveway. And because that traffic signal fits within a system of traffic signals along Marlborough Street, we're recommending just minor signal timing changes at each of the intersections along Marlborough Street to just improve progression and make sure that the signals are operating properly in coordination along the corridor. And so just in conclusion, we feel that these recommended improvements mitigate the impacts of the proposed project. The project will have minimal impacts, and the driveways can adequately serve the development traffic.
What do you think is the reason to changing the traffic frequency from the old projected project and this one?
It's just a different development program. There's less intensive traffic uses on the site.
You're saying it's because it's more residential and less commercial?
It's smaller. The uses that are on the site are less intensive traffic uses. Residential doesn't generate typically as much traffic as some of the retail uses they had previously.
Okay.
Now, I've never seen one of these flashing beacons. Have there been any studies done as to their effectiveness?
Yes, there is a lot of research. They're relatively new, particularly in the state of Connecticut. I am aware of a few installations in the state of Connecticut. Because they were experimental in nature several years ago, every time one was installed, there was always a before and after study, just measuring driver yielding behavior. Essentially, there'd be tests like pedestrians trying to cross the road before it was installed, and you measure how many cars stop and let them cross versus just blowing right past them. And then they would do the same study after these installed, and they've proven to be very effective at increasing drivers yielding.
Like how much? You have numbers?
I don't know them off the top of my head, but I could provide some research for you.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'd rather have numbers than dramatic or improvement and stuff like that.
On behalf of the pedestrian.
I would
Okay.
say it was experimental, Bruce, and if it wasn't working, it wouldn't be experimental anymore. So the federal government has to allow these to be used because they are working.
Okay.
Yes, and they were experimental. Now there is approval in the state of Connecticut to install these without the I don't remember the term, but
Yes. It's a basic concern of ours that people be able to get across Marlborough Street safely. And if you're saying that these signals will do that, that's why I want to know how much, how many, whatever numbers you can get.
Yep.
Because that's a major concern of ours, and we're going to harp on it, I'm afraid.
Understood. We'll get you whatever research we can, and we'll also be working with DOT on this as well.
Thank you.
Good evening for the record. My name is Paul Harris. I'm the principal of Cole Harris Associates in Westport, Connecticut. I'm not an architect, I'm an industrial designer, but I employ designers and architects and planners and project managers. What I'm passing out to you right now is a architectural narrative and also a package of the presentation we're going to show you, which is pretty much coincides with the architectural submission you guys have received already, with a few additional embellished drawings. So I'm sure you'll all flip to the back, but if you can stay with me for the presentation, it'd be great. I'd like to read into the record the narrative, because I think it sums up much of what we've done, after which I'd like to have Alan discuss some of the buildings, and then I'll cover the rest. This architectural narrative for the new Brainerd Place is building upon the vision generated by the town of Portland for the very prominent Elmcrest site, with its vibrant communities initiative, market study, and concept plans. Reimagined as Brainerd Place by our team, our proposed development plan most closely resembles Concept A from that study. Recognizing the significance of this site and its location to the town of Portland, we have been guided by the idea that we could contribute a great deal of the sense of community here by bringing town-oriented, mixed-use, centered on a new village green. As you can see, a village green fronting on Marlborough Street. In fact, Dan, if you could flip to the next page. Which is what, sorry, it's this one. This village green area up in here, which is fronted on Marlborough Street, is a centerpiece of our design, acknowledging the importance of several of the historic residences that still exist on the Elmcrest site. And we are proposing, as you all know, to preserve and rehabilitate two, the circa 1855 Brainerd and the 1884 Sage House at their current locations as anchors to the village green and as kind of historic touchstones between the existing town and the new development. Our plan adds a third structure between these two historic buildings, houses, and that's Building D, which we'll get to in a moment. It's envisioned and designed to suggest that it might have been a carriage house, and Building D is what is about to become the coffee shop, which is right here, and it's situated both between Sage and Brainerd. Sorry, I just missed my place. It will be scaled and detailed to complement the two houses and the residential character that prevails along the north side of Marlborough Street. Reinforcing the concept of the green, we'll be proposing landscape and pedestrian walks, which you've already heard about, and a gazebo. And this gazebo that is right here, our plan is kind of inspired by a similar structure right now that exists in town, which is in front of the current town hall, which all of which are appropriate to a civic open space. Contributing to the idea of integrating the best elements of the current site with the new work the plan retains, as the landscape architect tonight has discussed, many important specimen trees as possible, including magnolia, spruce, ginkgos, as well as a 48-inch beech tree and a 60-inch oak tree. Entering the site along Marlborough, through the green, one encounters a new building, which is building number A, which is at the rear of the property. This is planned as a mixed-use structure with a combination of retail and office spaces. Architecturally, we've tried to draw on what we consider to be the local and regional building vocabulary, which is referenced in building mass and building form and details and finished materials. We've imagined this building A as something of a that might reflect a 19th century mill building or an industrial building from this area of Connecticut. New buildings E and F to the east of the site are proposed as residential buildings as complements to the commercial buildings in our mixed use. And the design of these buildings take advantage of grade changes. The grade that changes along Marlborough to the back of the site to the south. The slopes from the south frontage on Main Street. The facade of the building E right here, which is fronting the residential Marlborough strip, is kept low. It's our lowest elevation, and it's at 3 stories to respect the existing scale along this whole street level. Parking beneath the buildings is concealed from the north, and again, the sloping landform. Building E at the back, I'm sorry, that was Building E, helps to frame the village green to the west, which is going this way, and it's also mirrored down in to the south and with Building F, and it creates a sort of open plaza and interior court. The mass of these buildings are broken up by features such as bays, balconies, and details that reflect more of a residential flavor as opposed to some of these other buildings, which are more commercial. We're looking to incorporate a rich palette, including brick veneer with local brownstone accents and siding that ties these residential buildings to the commercial ones in the complex. The third, which you're all well aware of, which is the Hart Jarvis building, which was built in the 1830s, will be relocated to the southwest corner and renovated. Here it will reside prominently up on top of the crest of the hill and reoriented with its classical portico facing west, which is a facade many people probably have never seen as they drive up and down Main Street. And it's pretty spectacular. Also, when you cross over the Connecticut River on the bridge. And the western views of this house and this location also benefit from the comparatively narrow western elevation of Building A. So while this is our largest building on the site, the building that faces Main Street is fairly narrow. Lastly is Building B, which will be a pharmacy. It'll be located on this busy corner with Marlborough and Main Street intersects. And while accommodating the established design requirements of the brand, so this is probably going to be a CVS store. They have certain brand standards. However, we believe that they're somewhat flexible. And there is a picture of a CVS in your package, which is only a holding. It's a holding spot because we hope to help dictate some of the materials and maybe even some of the building mass to have it reflect back into some of the nomenclature that's on the rest of the site. And we'll also share the same palette of the other buildings. Before I get into each of the individual buildings, I'd like to ask Alan to come up and talk about the 3 historical buildings that are being restored. And
I think you do have my slides in there, don't you? Yep. I think they are loaded. Yep. Thank you, Steve. Good evening. Thanks, Paul. My name is Alan Munkitrick. I'm the principal partner with Munkitrick Associates. We're an architectural, interior design, and space planning firm. We've been here in Portland for almost 30 years. Munkitrick Associates' assigned role in this Brainerd Place development, as requested by Dan, is specifically to provide architectural services for the historic 1855 Brainerd House, which is Building G, and to serve as consultant for the historic 1884 Sage House, Building C. In another capacity, we're also assisting with the coordination of the relocation and restoration of the historic 1830 Hart Jarvis House, Building H. So those 3 is what we're focusing on. Well, we've got the old-fashioned.
Oh, here we go. I think he's got it. Okay.
All right. Thank you. That's perfect. Plans for these 3 rehabilitation projects are at various stages right now. The historic 1855 Brainerd House, which you see here, Building G, is set slightly back from Marlborough Street. You probably all have glimpsed it. And in the plan, we're very pleased that it's going to retain the landscaping in the front and the back. I think that's really, really important. And as you've heard, it will serve as the main amenity center for the use and enjoyment of the tenants in the residential blocks to the east. The schematic plans have been developed so as to require minimal changes to the exterior of the Brainerd house. Next slide, please.
When you say amenities, what are you talking about?
I'll tell you right now.
Oh, okay. I have to write it down.
Good question. 5,740 square feet of interior space will be completely renovated in the Brainerd house. Mechanical systems upgraded in such a way so as to maintain as much of the historic fabric of the interiors as is possible. The renovation will include a leasing office. Now we're on the first floor. A leasing office, conference room, tenants club room, and lounge spaces on the first floor. And on the to the right is a second floor plan. Will be located a fitness center, a yoga room, a lounge, and a library reading room. New bathrooms, a kitchen, and a two-stop elevator are also planned. Next slide, please. So building C, the 1884 Sage House, which is close to Marlborough Street. This is the historic building that you always see. We've developed a feasibility study to demonstrate that the first floor of about 3,100 square feet can be adapted for reuse as a restaurant facility, seating up to about 94. If you could go to the next slide, please, Steve. Thank you. This is a very schematic feasibility plan, but I include it because I want to point out that we're going to remove two modern and incompatible additions on the rear of the house, on the south side of the house, which you probably have never seen unless you've been into the site. We're going to do that for a couple of reasons. The main reason is to try to create a nice open garden terrace for outdoor dining in the back of about 600 square feet. That's not included in that 94 estimate of interior seating. All of this can be done and accomplished with minimal modifications to the building's historic elevation. So again, we're like the Brainerd house, we're really pleased that we can fit an interior program without making major changes to the historic elevations. Finally, if you could go to the next slide, please. For the 1830 Hart Jarvis house, or Building H, which will be relocated, as you've heard, from the interior of the site to the southwest corner facing Main Street. We've coordinated its footprint now, as you've heard. I think that we can now accommodate the entire structure, which is great. There is a rear wing, which you don't see in this. You do see it from Marlborough Street. This is the elevation that faces into the site, which very few people have seen. It's quite majestic and important. So now this new enlarged footprint, which Dan and the site engineers have accommodated, which is great, is going to facilitate now about 5,800 square feet on 2 levels. It's really quite a large structure. As you probably know, citizens from a number of local nonprofit groups are now working on the details of this building's program. And as that comes into focus, we will assist with the internal layouts that, like the Brainerd and the Sage houses, will preserve the Hart Jarvis house's historic integrity. It's been a pleasure to work productively with Paul of Cole Harris Associates on some of the details of the new commercial construction that Paul will next present. Our mutual goal is to see that wherever possible, the architectural design for the new construction will relate to these historic structures in form, materials, and their look and feel. We will continue to assist Paul and Dan's design team in any way we can to capitalize on the historic assets of the site. Successful development of the Elmcrest campus will inspire new and positive development of Portland's downtown village. Thanks very much.
I think I'm gonna run with it up there. I think that's probably I'd like to now just kind of walk you through schematically these buildings, and then Dan may have a few words to add, and then open it up to questions from the commission. So let me take you through some of the buildings and some of the thinking that was behind what we have here. Starting with Building D, which is the first building that you see as you come down onto the campus. And when we first talked about the concept of this and looking at the original study that you guys had commissioned, the concept A, this somewhat most closely resembles that. It had a few more buildings in this area, but we feel these two buildings here are critical because even though they're part of more of a commercial kind of fabric, this building up front we wanted to have relate as much as we could to the more residential scale. There was an old carriage house behind Brainerd, which was just not feasible to move or relocate. So instead of copying it, because the Italianate style of this building and the more shingly style Victorian, we wanted something that would buffer the two. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the concept of this building is something that could have been possibly a carriage house or a stable or a utility building. This is the sidewalk that runs right along Marlborough. The plans for this right now is a 3,200, almost a 3,300 square foot footprint. It's a single-story structure. Probably 2 tenants can fit in this, a small restaurant or a coffee shop, which is what I think we're hoping to get as a tenant. It's got a mixed use of materials. It's got vertical siding. It's got a metal roof on it. And then it's also got an asphalt roof and a brownstone portion of thin stone, brownstone veneer at the base of the building and on this other wing on the other side. If we go to the second plan, please. This kind of illustrates that floor plan, how it might be broken up. The main entrances to this building are off the parking lot, so you come in from this building from the south, even though Marlborough is up along the side here. So this is broken up, as you can see, into 2 tenant spaces. Again, the larger form, which is approximately 35 feet tall, is the larger cladded building, which is a vinyl cladded. It looks like a barn siding, and then the other piece here is the brownstone structure, which is slightly lower and subordinate, and it's a mix of materials. The shingles on the roof will be an architectural grade timberline, probably a color similar to something that looks like weathered cedar, even though it's asphalt. It's a very popular color. I'm sure you've all seen it. And that's pretty much the concept on the exterior envelope of that building. The second building, I'm sorry, I wanted to show this because this was the actual drawing you guys got in your submission last week, but our renderer colorized them, so we thought you'd like those better. The next building, as you come down, can we go back to the back a couple, Dan, to the site plan with the letters on them? Thank you. The next building, as you come down, is Building A, and this is a very large mixed-use structure. It's got a footprint of approximately it's got a footprint of 38,750 square feet. The first main level, which is in the parking level, could be either for a single tenant or it could be for multiple tenants. We don't know. But we see this as retail. The second story of this building would be offices, either again multiple tenants, single tenants, and the entrance to the office space will be off the back parking lot. All the retail space is all along this. There's a sidewalk, a planter lined with trees, and then across the entire run of the whole building is a covered colonnade. So for weather, you can come out. And if you're parked over here, you can walk under the whole building and stay out of the weather. What was important about this building, as I mentioned before, we wanted to kind of emulate something that seemed more like a 19th century manufacturing or mill structure. So now we can flip down a few, Dan. We'll go to this rendering here. This is a view from when you come down the main entrance. And what we're trying to pick up on is this very simplistic 19th century architectural style. Very little embellishment. Very simple coursing of fenestrations of the windows. We've got them up on columns, and we're trying to create maybe a diverse building mass breaking it up since the building is about 380 feet long. We wanted to find a way to break this mass up. So it seemed more like, individual buildings or gang buildings, or possibly a mill building that evolved over, 50 years or so. So brick will be the primary material, and then we'll come back to that vertical siding, which was also very common in this part of Connecticut. And the colonnade goes to more of a wood post look, even though will be vinyl clad for maintenance. Right now, the signage on the building, the signage that you're seeing here is broken up for multi-tenant, whereas if we have a single tenant, the signage will be probably minimized.
You said the main construction material is brick?
The main building facade of these structures is a brick veneer, yes.
As opposed to brownstone?
We don't have brownstone on this building, but we do have accents of brownstones. So all of these big, heavy lintels that you see over all the colonnades and the lintels that are all over the tops of the windows are brownstone veneer, even up to the old hatch where the storage bay might have been on that building. Second slide, please. This kind of shows the facade. It's very difficult to see a building like this in elevation. No one can ever see a building like that. So the sketch that you saw previous is pretty much what a pedestrian would see. But we wanted to be able to take you through what the facades are and how the building does evolve in building mass. This is the corner that you were looking at in that rendering, which is a gable that faces the street, Marlborough Street, and there's two of these. It's flanked by a lower structure that might seem more wood-like, and then another piece also in that more wood-like structure, and then it goes back again to a brick facade. That is that colonnade that's undercover, so people in all sorts of weather can come all the way out and walk across this before they come out with 1, 2, 3, 4 entrances into the parking lot or off the end. As the building turns the corner and goes down the hill and faces Main Street, this is the elevation at Main Street. In fact, this building is all you'll see from Main Street. This portion of the building is set way back here. So when we talked earlier about the Hart Jarvis building, which is kind of located in this area over here, that kind of classic facade will stand out. There'll be trees flanked behind it, and then this building's facade will be kind of set behind that as well as a backdrop. And we think the change in materials will actually complement and offset Hart Jarvis very well. This is the building that faces east. So when you're up at this side of the complex and you're parking over here, when you get out of the car, that's what you see. And that colonnade that you see here wraps around the corner, ends here, and then that's the back part of the building. The last facade that pretty much no one will see, except maybe a portion of this, shows that L-shaped piece that sticks out. The cladding of the building is changed. The brick facade runs across. And this piece right here is the entry to the back of the building, which has elevators and stairs that brings you up into the office level. So all these windows up here and across the top is all at office space level. Lastly, there's about a 5,600 square foot area on the lowest level, which is down at the lowest parking level, and this is perfect size for a restaurant, which was described earlier. Next. This is that lower level down on Main Street, which is the 5,600 square foot. It has a plaza, and the sidewalk that comes down along the building actually runs down and comes across, so it's easily accessible. There's a railing system around this, so you're actually looking down into the court. So at this point, you're probably 8 feet in the air. Is that right, Steve? Probably about 8 feet in the air from the sidewalk, and then down here, you're at grade. There's a fire stair that comes down from the 2 floors above that exits out onto this level. The next slide, please. This is the basic footprint of the retail space, which is the main level. This is your colonnade that runs, covered colonnade that runs across the front. These are 24-foot or so columns. We're hashing out the back half of this building. If this is retail or grocery stores or whatever this is, they're going to need back office space or back area storage space. There needs to be entrances and loading docks And right now, this is very schematic in nature. Whoever the tenant is will dictate what these things actually become. Next slide, please. And this is the upper level, which would be the office space. There's a single elevator that comes up and a stairwell and 2 other means of egress on this floor. And this can be broken up into many multiple tenants or a single tenant as wished. Next slide, please. These are the black and whites that you guys had gotten in your package earlier. Hold on one second. Let me just check something. I want to see where we're at. Next slide, please. Building E, which is the building, which is this building right here, which is the first residential building that faces on the corner of Perry and Marlborough Street. What you're looking at in this view is the back of that building from the campus of the site. So Dan, I don't know if you can skip back real quick. I just want to orient everybody of the views we're going to be looking at. Go back to the site plan, which would be the first, yeah, the lettered colored one. One more. One more up? Yep. One more down. There you go. We're looking at 2 views of this building, and there's some massaging that still has to do here because this was not loaded. So this is a representation of what you're looking at today. We have a central campus view of this building, which is from about this perspective here. However, there's this magnificent 60-inch oak tree and another large ginkgo, which would probably block this view. So if this tree wasn't here, you're looking at this view right here. The other view we're going to look at is kind of from across the street here along Marlborough, looking at that. And we've kind of stripped away some of the trees that are going to hide this facade to enable you to see this building a little better. So if you can now go to that last, this one here. Oh, back one. Back one, please. So this is on the campus. What you see is this building, and the grade is a little bit higher on this side than what's depicted in this drawing. But what you're looking at is three stories of apartments that are situated on top of a parking garage. So from the front on Marlborough Street, you'll only see 3 stories. But on the back in the campus, where these U-shaped buildings face each other, the parking garages are entering under this level. This building is important because while you can enter it from Marlborough Street, and it does have an entrance to it, the plaza court entry and the parking pedestrian is all in the back here. So there's kind of a grand stair that goes up to this beautiful open courtyard that actually covers the top of the parking garage. The opposite view, which we don't have, of the building across the street, just doesn't have this lower garage level. The lower garage level is actually an apartment unit because the building to the south of this is 4 stories. The building materials, again, what we want to try to do is continue to use some of the materials that we've already started on the site. We'd like to get a mixed use of a vertical siding. This is a vinyl shake material, which have gotten pretty good over the years. And then again, our brick material that we have kind of running as a ribbon through all of our buildings. There's balconies you're seeing on all of the units have balconies as an amenity for each unit. And then the railings, they have a light railing here as well. If I go to the next slide, this is the view along the street on Marlborough Street. You're looking at 3 stories that run across from the corner of Perry. And this is where the Village Green opens. So what you'd see from about this corner all the way to about over here is a very large open lawn. We don't have a drawing of the gazebo, but you're all familiar with the gazebo that stands in front of Town Hall. We'd like to copy that gazebo, maybe not the exact length, but we like the post and beam construction, the color of it, and we want to create a kind of a miniature link back to Town Hall. So that's what sits in this open area here. And then all these magnificent trees, which are off this area as well. I'll stop pointing at all the local art. So again, there's a variation of brick. We're going to use as much brick as we can across the front facade, mixed in with similar materials of the vertical vinyl barn siding, and then some of the shake. The roof up here is an architectural grade. Again, weathered wood is the color of it. It looks like a weathered cedar shingle, and this is the material we're going to be running on all of our buildings. Next slide, please. This is a basic footprint, and by the way, Humphreys and Partners are the architects on this job. It's not my office, but we have been collaborating with them, and they're the ones out of Dallas, which is why it says Humphreys down there. This is the parking garage. It's on the lower level. Marlborough Street is up here. It's subterranean. The entry here, Dan can talk about this later. We're probably going to flip it to this side. But this just shows that lower parking level, and then you walk out at grade here. Next slide, please. These are typical footprints. The first one up here, while the building looks large or long, it's actually fairly hollow. So the roof plane, it's kind of a big U shape. This is the big raised courtyard where off of Marlborough Street you can actually enter this building and then come back out into the courtyard. So all the residents, this is the first floor and there's 2 more floors above it. All the and this is the typical second, third floor. All the residents can all come down and use this public open space, whether it's hanging out with their kids or whatever. And this is a nice amenity for the building. Next slide, please. This is the elevation, which again is very tough. This is the elevation that runs along Marlborough Street. We're looking at 3 stories of apartments. The varying mixed materials of brick and barn siding and the vinyl cedar shake. This shows the west elevation. This actually isn't correct. Our grade that runs along this is a little bit more level and then drops. So this drawing is actually not correct. So what you'll see from the Village Green is more about 3 stories before it drops off into the corner. And this entry that you're seeing in the building here is actually up at this level. Next slide, please. This is that kind of grand entry up into the plaza, which is on the back. It's on the south side, which is only visible from the interior court between the 2 buildings. That's the entry into the garage level, which will probably be swung over to here, and then you have your 3 levels of units. This is the view that runs along Perry Street, which is a little bit more accurate. However, this grade is actually about 3 feet higher when it hits the corner of the parking level. This section right here is where the emergency vehicles can come and go, but this is not a primary entry point. It's through the main front entry. Next slide, please. This is the parking garage, which looks very similar to the first one I showed you. The difference here is the main court between the buildings are up here, so you have to drive to the back of this. This is right along the south property line, which is a side of the building very difficult to see, and the entry into the parking is down in here. Next slide, please. The main level, which is our courtyard, which is this level, and this is actually at street level. So that parking area that was out in front, and then the building E, which is on Marlborough Street, you walk straight across this onto the plaza and into this room. So into this entry where the elevator banks are. So this level is actually apartments, whereas on the building above, it's the parking garage. So it's important to point out that the roof elevation of the building that starts on Marlborough Street doesn't change. It's the same height all the way through. It's the site that drops out from underneath it, which provides us for an extra story of apartments on this back building, which is why this back building has 4 stories of apartments, 1 story of parking, and the building in the front on Marlborough has 1 story of parking and 3 stories of apartments. However, from the entry front points, they still the parking lots are submerged in grade. Next slide, please. This is that parking court elevation when you're down inside the campus. That main stair that comes across. So these facades mirror each other, so you kind of have this big open courtyard. One is about 10 feet lower than the other one, but it's kind of a nice open vista court between the 2 units, and I think very nice. The last facade that you see here is the western elevation of the building, which faces back into the campus and faces the commercial retail building. Parking runs along this side. This is reasonably close to what we're going to have here. We have an entry to the apartments on this level, and then the grade and the parking goes down to the back, and you actually get into the building across the back facade. Next slide, please. And this is the facade that no one will see. This is the southern facade. That's where you enter into the parking with the 4 levels of apartments over it. And then it actually runs down the eastern Perry Street toward the back of the site. And again, you see the garage that comes out of the ground and the building facade there. Next slide. Also part of your package, so you can have an idea of what these units are, and Dan can get into that next, what the mix is. But we have various 6 different units. There are 4 here. There are 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. There are corner units. Next slide. And this is one of your, that's one of your 1 bedrooms there, and a 2 bedroom there.
It's
Yep.
these 2 are 2 bedrooms.
2 bedrooms, thank you. And with that, I'd like to maybe turn it over to Dan to close. Unless you have any questions for me, I'm sorry.
Is this building E or building F?
These are all the same. The buildings have the same
Both
units in
buildings
them.
are the-
Have the
except one-
same types of units in them, yes.
Okay, it's just the difference in 3 stories versus 4.
The only difference between the 2 buildings, is that building F, which is at the back of the site, has an extra level of apartments. And Dan, if you could go back to the rear elevation for a minute. Oh, okay. Let's go back to the building first. If you can go back to the color rendering of the back corner, which would be the first rendering here, that one. So it's clear. The elevation of this roof, which starts as 3 stories on Marlborough Street, that elevation stays as it runs through the site. It's the building site itself that slopes away. So again, what we have here as three apartment floors and a parking level, what happens on the back is that parking level becomes an apartment level, and that's where you pick up your 4-story.
So
The
you're
reason
saying that
the reason I'm
both-
asking,
Sorry.
the reason I'm asking is because I'm looking at the unit tabulation,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows basically 70% 1 bedroom and 30% 2 bedrooms. Is that true of both buildings? Is that percentage true of both buildings?
Dan, you want to answer that?
Yes, basically as I recall, the regs would not to exceed 30% on the 2s.
Okay.
So it's a mix of studios and 1s that are in that 70% range, and then the 2 bedrooms are.
Yeah. I'm looking at the tabulation, it says 101 apartments, but of those 101 apartments, 29 of them are 2 bedrooms. The remainder are 1.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, yeah, you're reading it properly. It's, it would be, here.
Do you want this, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a 70.
Yeah.
There you see there on the screen.
Yep.
So you have that for each building.
Yep. Well, I know, I'm looking in terms of numbers though, because that's why I asked if it's building E or building F. Because you have a different, you have an additional story on building F.
Yep. Would you like to go to the tabulation for the 4-story?
I would. Okay, so there are more, yeah, the percentage is about the same, so there are what? 39 2-bedroom apartments.
Yeah, yep. And the breakdown, percentage breakdown in the right column is the.
All right, so 30,
is kinda
what,
there, make it-
what's 39 and 29?
So,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, they were given the directive,
Yep.
that we, that discussion that we had when we were actually talking about the regulation changes back.
I know. Okay.
I'll
And so
touch,
I-
sure.
But I just wanted to be clear, when you said that it's 3 stories and 4 stories, the building heights are the same because you're gaining more on the bottom of.
Yeah, and that story count are the residential floors where the apartments are. So it's kind of the same. It's like a sloping grade. So What starts the building roof height on Marlborough Street, which Dan is about to pull up right now for us, is 3 stories. So that building elevation, if you drew a level line to the back of the site, that roof doesn't get any higher.
Yeah.
It stays the same. What enables us to do that, and reasonably effectively, I think, is that the grade falls away so far to the back of the site, and without impacting the building, what's the perceivable building scale from the road. The other thing to also consider is that the site also falls for A, so that building also, which is the A building, is about 10 feet lower than Brainerd, you think, Steve? About 14 feet lower than Brainerd. So that also, in scale, I think Brainerd's 40 feet high, give or take. And the front of A is whatever,
No, that's in the 40s.
Yeah, it's in the 40s. So the building from the road, Marlborough Street, nothing's going to look higher than that, 3 stories high, because the A building drops 14 feet, and the building's probably 40 some odd feet. So it's probably lower. The midpoint of the roof is lower than the Brainerd house, which is kind of interesting. The last building I'd like to just throw out there, which is the last rendering, our favorite one, is our CVS building on the corner, which is a prominent location, and we all love CVS. I buy everything there, and including stocking stuffers and half my Christmas presents, but on Christmas Eve. But it's they have certain they're a brand, and they have things that they need to incorporate into their buildings, and we are very optimistic that we're going to be able to at least incorporate the palette that we feel is more sensitive to Portland and the campus that we've tried to create, and whether we get a chance to change any of the building mass, we'd be happy to talk to them about it. But we will be revisiting that once Dan has secured them as a tenant.
When you say building, you're just talking about just the size of it?
The size is pretty much the same. We'd like to articulate something with it. We'd like to change the materials if we can. We'd like to maybe incorporate a piece of a gable that reflects off the retail commercial buildings, so those buildings relate in some way, or maybe even bringing our vertical siding back onto it. So
They're so big, they typically dictate what they're going to build.
right. So with that, I'll thank you.
Good job. So,
Are we done with the slides?
I am making a quick reference and then we can cover it.
That's what I'm heading for.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the pointer is activated, not just the, there we go, okay.
All right, so.
What's that?
This one?
No, this works. I'm good. So, there's a lot of stuff here, right? And a lot of folks have worked very hard to pull it together, but this is actually the beginning of a process. And so, in that spirit, one of the things Paul made a couple references to is as you go through the site and you say, okay, well, Sage is here, Brainerd's here, they're locked in. This is a puzzle that we're filling in uses around. We're the decision maker on the residential product, and it drives people a little nuts, but sometimes we'll, like, this is my call on what Paul was alluding to in terms of this access point. And so I don't like the fact that there's an entrance to the garage so close to the amenity area. And so what you will get next week is the move of this entry point down to this part of the building. And so there'll be a couple things associated with that. That's just a detail in the whole thing, but it's worth noting in everything Paul presented in terms of the elevations from Marlborough of that 3-story height of the building. It holds. Nothing we modify to address the traffic is going to affect anything there. So then you get into the process side of it. We have, CVS that we're talking to, and we're trying to put a deal together, and we will absolutely, because it's good development, push to have as many features and their prototypes conform to the vision for the rest of the site. And when you look at the actual design of A and D, and one of the reasons we put so much time and effort into getting the table set right was to have a very, very attractive, appropriate building, and then start the conversations with prospective tenants. And that will bring us back to be showing you, well, here's what we've got going on the A building and D. So this is something that we're looking to get out of the gates. You can't figure it all out precisely before you start a job of this scale, but we can get all the guiding principles together. We can engineer it so that this thing can be filled in with economically viable tenants, and I think this is going to be a beautiful project. So I hope that our presentation wasn't too long. It at least probably reflects the number of people and the resources that go into creating something like this. But I think we'll open it up to questions if that's what you'd like to do next.
Yeah, all right. Maybe you can cover that up and we can turn the
Yep.
lights on, back on. Okay, part two of this is questions and comments by members of the commission.
I don't know if I heard correctly or if I understood correctly. Did you say that the coffee shop which would be in building D would have a drive-through?
That is what's designed for, yeah. And that's something that the ideal tenant would be Starbucks. That's something that they are looking for in their locations.
Okay, I've got a bunch of questions.
Sure, fire away.
Let's begin with the pool. Is that going to be a swimming pool
Yes,
for residents only?
yes.
How are you going to keep other people out?
It's controlled access. And any pool has to have a gate around it anyway.
Yes,
So it's,
I understand. So people have to show a card or something like that?
yeah, there are access control systems that you swipe for access to different parts of the different
And lifeguards?
residential facilities. No, it's generally posted with the rules of engagement, but no lifeguards.
No lifeguards. So that's a safety issue.
One that's dealt with pretty routinely in Class A apartment complexes around the country.
Okay. Let's talk about, it sounds like you've made some sort of a decision as far as getting people across Marlborough Street. I'm looking at the traffic flow around the CVS that you're going to put in. It looks to me like people coming in from the main entrance off Marlborough Street have to go all the way almost to Main Street and then come back around, all the way around the building. And then, well, maybe they go out on Main Street, and if they don't, they have to go all the way back over to Marlborough Street. That seems like a kind of a strange traffic pattern as far as
So you're talking about the specifics of the flow
Right.
around the CVS building?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so
In order to get to it's a convoluted
Right.
way to get through a drive-through.
And it's a constraint based on the frontage associated with the state road. And so the right in, right out is the most we think that we can get from the state for access that's
No.
more convenient. No. What I mean is that's our option there. So
Yeah,
then
well-
if we can't turn left
Well,
along Main into the site, we're left to coming down the main entrance.
let's take a look at that. If somebody comes off Main Street, takes a right, then they have to cross traffic to get to the drive-through, and then they have to go all the way around the building to get to the drive-through. And if people come into the main part of it, they have to come almost all the way to Main Street, then take a right and go all the way back around and so forth. That sounds like, that looks like to me a design problem.
Access, for the record, Steve Solomon from TCA. Access, if you're coming from this direction,
Yes.
you could make a right at this driveway and come around and enter the drive-through here.
Okay, you're right.
And if you're coming off of Main Street, you can come in around, or you could make a left and then a right into that drive-through. I'm thinking most people will come like this.
Okay. I'm looking at this, I don't see where the actual drive-through window is. Right, well, right there,
Yes.
okay, okay. Second question I have is around parking. I mentioned that when we did our informal conversation, and I kind of suggested that tonight. You know, you have 804 parking spaces. That strikes me as, looking at this, looks like a lot. Or maybe even like too many. We're interested in reducing the amount of impervious surfaces if we can.
Sure, and we've tried to model out and accommodate on a level I've never done before in terms of tree saving, historic restoration, you name it.
You're
And
a good
so-
guy. But
I'm just saying.
You could probably do better, though.
But for Uncle Fred, it wouldn't have happened, I'll tell you that. But we're here now. And so there are rules for the net rentable areas and the parking ratios that we can't go below without really running a risk at the end of a lease-up process where we are underparked and we can't lease the remaining space because we don't have places for their employees. So the two levels, and now three, the third level actually came about because we were accommodating requirements to keep the Hart Jarvis house on the historic registry. They wanted to see flat terrain all the way around the building. And so this 5,600 square foot section in the bottom of the A building materialized through accommodating the historic preservation. I note this because each one of these things, we've sort of been a minnow in the ocean flying around here, or floating around. And at the end of the day, to have marketable space, you gotta have sufficient parking.
Okay. You think by reducing the amount of parking, you'll be underparked, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, because when you look at the site plan, it's one thing if it's one level, but that A building is a large building. It's multi-leveled, and it has requirements both on the retail and on the upper office side that drive the parking calculation.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of that parking for that A building, and the parking, some of it behind the building seems to be like difficult. You know, I'm not an expert, but difficult to get out of the parking places and into the store. So, and I'm trying to figure out that is it good business, or is it just to meet the parking numbers?
That rear parking area is for second-story office. There's an entrance.
Oh,
yeah, you
okay.
go in and you ride an elevator up past the
Got it.
retail, so
Okay.
you're not.
I'll take that back.
Okay.
What's the use of the courtyards around Building A?
They're just open areas right now.
You show them like they're gonna be like paved somehow, or,
Well, to be part of the sidewalk system.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's all they're gonna be, the sidewalks?
Well, there'll be open courtyards now where people can.
And that can be driven by tenancy also. And so, as an example, on the lower level that I was referring to back by Hart Jarvis,
Yep.
outdoor patio seating for a restaurant would be lovely in that location. But without tenants, we can't commit to specific things. We're just trying to create the opportunity
Okay.
and then go to market.
You said this was going to be, I presume, in two phases. And in the first phase, if I heard correctly, it would be 40% residential and 20% commercial?
42 to be exact. And then
Well,
20, yeah.
give
round
or take
numbers,
1%.
Yeah, give or take, right. The idea there is that there are practical aspects to the phasing. So we get and fully appreciate the concept of having a balanced site. Our gesture in honoring that in the code, the regulations, is to say, let's create what people will experience as they come by the site. So this entire swath of E, G, D, C, B, H can be developed while this area can be done in a later phase. The perfect world is good leasing activity on A.
Yep.
And the phasing plan just goes poof. In fact, you could find that you're on E, G, D, C, B, A, H, and this is the only thing going on in phase 2. But right now, we have to kind of say, let's get the dialogue started. We can build this building on spec without any tenants, the coffee shop.
Yep.
You really would not take on a building of this size without pre-leasing activity.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's hard to build it partially.
Got it.
Okay.
I understand it from a development point of view, but we're real interested in having the residential and the commercial properties develop at about the same pace. And
understood.
Okay. And 40/20 doesn't sound like the same pace.
But this is where the exercise gets complex, because we're trying to deliver something in less than ideal economic conditions. And so the concept is that this allows us to set the stage for what will come in A and F later, potentially, by doing this whole swath in phase 1. And we're just trying to get an engine turning. It is nice. I would love to do what you're saying with all I can articulate, right? But it just is, it's a process. And so we're going to be constrained by the market on some level. We're looking to have the flexibility, as we've made gestures to partner with the various stakeholders throughout the town, to say, well, we're saying that this would be lovely to be a one-phase job. We don't look at it as more than 2 phases, but we need some flexibility to get out of the gates.
Yes. I think we're in favor of flexibility, but we're not in favor of 40/20, 2 to 1.
If you have a better idea how to actually build on this site, we're fine. But we've put so many disciplines to this, and a lot of resources gone into today's presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't envy you your job. I understand that.
But we all want something to happen, correct? I mean,
We all want something to correct,
that's
yes. What we want to
effectively
happen is development that's about equal residential, commercial at the same time.
Sure.
We can, you know, we don't need to argue about exact percentages, but 2 to 1 seems a bit extreme to me.
And I knew that from our earlier conversations, and I can't figure out how to actually do it differently from how we're proposing.
You got like a dozen people in here. Some of them must know the answer to that.
They have very, very different skill sets. So, you know.
Okay. Anyway, when you come back, we're gonna continue to bother you about that.
No. I understand, and I would love to be able to get to the state level traffic review, so that we have knowable timeframes that we can incorporate into our leasing conversations, because we're not going to market with a phased plan. We're going to market with the entire piece. And my feeling is that if we can get that going, no one's going to care if this thing flips the other way percentage-wise, right? Where F is not being done and we're not getting enough residential, right? My understanding of the concern is always that there would be residential built without the commercial, and then we don't really have mixed use.
Right.
And so we understand that in order to get F, we got to get a whole mixed use.
Okay.
So this thing doesn't ever happen without, this doesn't even start without some serious commercial going on.
Okay, on to Marlborough Street, you're going to put a traffic signal in there, and you're going to make other changes? Is the state of Connecticut giving you any indication of what they're going to do? Or what they're going to approve?
I'll let Joe and Charlie get that.
Unfortunately, due to the rules of the Office of State Traffic Administration submittals, we don't have input from them yet. They won't actually accept a submittal until after we've made this initial submittal to the town. So we have already made the initial submittal to OSTA, but the timeline, we just haven't had any feedback from them. So just given their rules, that approval process has to follow the town's.
Yeah.
We do know that we did signal warrant analysis at the driveway. It is well above the warrants that would justify the installation of traffic signal there. So we can say with a high level of confidence that there would be a traffic signal at that driveway. We think that it's needed. And also the improvements we're doing at that intersection are very straightforward. We're essentially just modifying the median to move the curb cut from where it is today over to where the driveway is,
Yep.
and then we'll provide left turn lanes into the site. It is a straightforward design, but unfortunately, I can't say that the state has signed off on it yet.
No, I know. I don't expect you to, but I do expect that that you talk to people at the state, and they say, and you say to them, "What do you think about this?" And they say, "Well, of course, officially we can't say anything, but informally I can say."
Something we would not say in a
You would-
public
but you wouldn't-
hearing.
But you would, yeah. But you wouldn't say to us. Okay. All right. Other questions by members of the commission?
Well, I noticed that the Dawn Redwoods are on this map, and I thank you for putting them there, so I can see that they won't be staying there. And that's because there's just no way to do it.
And we had Paul and Nick, and then one of Paul's guys who is a historic expert, all converge on the site the same day, and it felt like we had three landscape architects who became, the in-town tree huggers. And candidly, the priority on that beech tree at the entrance, and then the trees in front of and behind Brainerd, that was something we said, okay, rework, because if you look at earlier plans, we didn't have anything here, and so D had to be reworked to make that happen. But I think that the grand entrance here coming in off of Marlborough is going to be exquisite because of those trees. And so we had to, like everything else, they talked about the carriage house. I mean, there are things that just can't make the final cut, and so.
Well, I appreciate you putting it on, so it's obvious that that's where it was.
Sure.
That oak tree was also a second cut. In fact, the large 60-inch oak tree behind Brainerd, and the ginkgo was not in the original
Right.
piece, and we were able to save that. That's a magnificent tree, and it really backlights, it kind of backframes the Brainerd house, and at night when you uplight that, it'll be spectacular. The ambient light that comes off it will really be kind of an energy source for the center of that campus.
Other questions or comments by members of the commission?
Well,
I'm trying to think of I think it might have been, maybe it was Steve in the beginning, that you talked about a waiver by CVS? I guess I'm not clear on
The
that.
landscape buffer,
Yeah,
which I wasn't quite clear whether that was needed, but which I believe it doesn't, and I want to confirm that with the town staff. But the waiver was they want a buffer along Main Street when it's adjoining a residential zone or there's residential properties.
But
After reviewing that, there is not a residential zone or
Right.
residential properties across Main Street. So I believe that buffer is not required. We can get rid of that waiver.
oh, so you don't need the waiver?
yeah, that's what he's saying.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand that.
Other questions or comments by members of the commission?
I just wanted to have somebody review again where there would be seating or gathering areas on the property where people could hang out, just for,
So you have the courtyard areas for the residential
well, yeah, I'm
buildings,
not
right?
talking
Okay.
about those people.
Same with
Those people? Those shoppers, you mean?
God's children. I'm talking about everybody else who's there.
Gathering, gathering places are near the gazebo, east of the main entrance. We have a sitting area west of the Sage House. You have the 2 courtyards that are adjacent to Building A. And then we have, there's some gathering space in front of Sage House and in front of the coffee shop.
So if you're gonna have those courtyards as gathering places, are you gonna furnish them? With tables and chairs and benches and stuff like there, so people can use them?
At this point, we were proposing benches throughout the site.
Okay. Other
And-
questions or comments, members of the
Yeah, I
commission?
have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
It's about the pool. So is that something that that you found with this type of a development is something that's desired for tenants like that? Because I was just thinking that could also be considered additional green space if there was no pool.
It's a very desirable amenity that's key to the marketing of this type of complex. So,
Other questions or comments? Members of the commission? Okay, my last one is, as I've said brownstone to you several times, and you said, well, we're gonna put it in lintels, and that's about it.
no, the barn, half the barn.
Half the barn looks like, to me, like,
Out here, this piece, in the elevations.
Yeah.
That's full on, brownstone. Do you have the color, colorized version of that?
yeah, I do. And it looks blue to me, blue and gray. There it
This
is.
whole back section.
The whole back.
Oh, okay,
That goes around and wraps.
okay. No, I got it. I didn't see it. I saw it was in the shade.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, it's kind of dark.
Where it's situated, it'll be very prominent.
The Brainerd house is made out of brownstone blocks. Have you thought about redoing that so that you expose that brownstone?
No, but I can start to think
Okay.
about it.
Any other
Hey.
question? All right, think about that.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments from
So
members of the
is-
commission?
Yeah, I just am curious, so you had the brownstone there, and then you had it on, I think on Building A, maybe part of, no.
Yeah, you put a
Yeah, the
veneer
lentils
the-
on Building A, yep, over,
Some of the trim.
yep.
Yeah.
What about the residential?
Basically, we had a lot of debate about where we could afford what products to bring to market, and had to really make some trade-offs on the thin brick veneer that we're using a lot of throughout the job, basically those gables on Building A, and then a lot of the residential buildings. And that's unusual for us to make that investment in that type of product off of the garage level. So we're coming up, and Paul won't toot his own horn, but I can. He's an incredibly talented designer, and I've tried to let him make the recommendations to yield the most sophisticated product and overall solution that we could bring to this market. And so I'm very pleased with it. I'm nervous about it because I've been working with him for 20 years, and I've never gotten him to fully reined in. So there's always a little more that is going to get spent when he's on the job. But it's a balancing act. So we've tried to incorporate elements that we believe will honor that history and not break the bank.
Okay.
Oh, so it is, there is.
There are, yeah, there are
That's
some
what I was
little
wondering, if that's.
Yeah.
And this is, I don't know if this is an appropriate question or not. Do we get to see samples of these veneers?
They'll typically show us samples.
Yeah, I mean, we can,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, cause
There
there's
are- there-
different levels.
no,
and-
no, I understand, and I think that, we're aligned in this one. We don't want cheap facades, and so, I think there are a number of ways you can address something like that. You can have stipulations and an approval that require certain processes before issuance of building permits. There are a couple ways of addressing what you're talking about that I think we could work with you on, but go ahead, Mary.
If I can just answer, the CVS building, which is not fully designed yet, is in our village district, so that's gonna require village district review, and that will require submission of material samples. So those will go to Anchor Engineering, who's our architectural firm that handles that. We can make those samples available to you when they come in for that building. So they do have to be submitted with one of the buildings because it falls within the village district regulations. But that's
And
just
that's
the CVS,
assuming, and
not
that's
everybody else.
assuming the CVS will agree to use.
And that's
Other
kind of the
material.
process of it
Yeah.
all, is, and it's an art, it's not a science, and so.
Or we can change the village district so it includes Brainerd Place.
So let me,
Actually,
but
I
let me
think we
address,
already did it.
let me address that from 30,000 feet, if I may. The biggest trick is getting folks hitched who have similar values and approaches to things. We've, I think, done that. And so what you want to do is effectively set up something that's actionable, where we're not killing deals because it's hard process to get anything approved, because we finally are getting some momentum coming out of the gates. But knowing that we are the investor and this is a long-term hold for us, we're not just going to slap stuff together. So we're looking to give you as much comfort in this process right now about the chosen materials. It's one of the reasons, I mean, Paul and I spent hours in the last 10 days on these materials decisions and deciding what will really have the biggest bang for the buck. And so we can get, to the extent that you're looking for some more specificity, we can give you a feel. But even when we sell product to someone, if we build a spec home, you'll get a specification and then an or equivalent, right? Because you can't have a situation where only one supplier makes something and then they go out of business and now you have to go redo your whole entitlement. So you have some degree of reasonableness built into it, but we can get a little more specific in any area that you have a specific concern.
Okay, other questions or comments? Okay, we're gonna open it up to the public now.
Mr. Chairman?
I guess not quite yet.
One clarification. The proposed gazebo is actually going to mimic the Arch Pavilion, which is just north of the police station. We reference, it's the old town hall. There's no gazebo on the current town hall. But it's the Arch Pavilion north of the police station.
Before, I didn't know what it was about.
Okay.
We know what you're talking about.
All right.
Okay, we're gonna turn it over to the public. It looks like at this time, we'll probably cut it off and at some point, and then continue the meeting. But we'll begin. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, my name is Susan Allison Young. I'm from 533 Main Street here in town. I have a couple of questions I'd like to address to different people. First of all, the traffic person.
You have to speak. You have to speak through the chair. You can. You go ahead, ask your question, and then he can respond if he wishes.
Thank you. My question is, it's already difficult to get into Main Street from the gas station and from this area that they're talking about being able to come out and take a right here. If you've ever been in that gas station and the traffic's coming off the bridge onto Main Street, you know how much of a problem it is to take a right there. How are we addressing that little minor problem?
take about, how do you turn right coming out of onto Main Street yeah, well, she's used the example as a gas station, but what she really is, I think, talking about is, how do you turn right? What have you done to make sure that's easier?
So answer both questions.
Either way, however you wanna do it.
I thought there was two questions. I'm sorry. I thought there was two questions. All right, so let me just, being resident and being at this gas station once a week at least, you're absolutely correct. During peak hour, you can sit here 3 or 4 cars long to try and get out of the gas station. Absolutely correct. So what's going to happen here? It's going to be that we have a drive here and a drive here. So if you're trying to get out of this drive and you can't get out of there, you're going to go to the other drive. You have a traffic signal here. So if you realize after this is open that that's difficult to get out, you go to the drive and turn left at the signal. At the gas station, you have no choice. You have to leave the gas station. But this driveway here, you have a choice. So when this is open, phase 1 or phase 2, and you see the backup here, if there is a backup there, you'll just go to the signal and turn left at the signal or turn right. So it's going to regulate itself, is the point. So yes, we anticipate this backing up, but again, it's going to be that we have an outlet, but a gas station you do not.
Do I address you as chairman?
Whatever you'd like to do.
Okay. Okay. Sir Chairman, the existing drainage that we're talking about, and we're talking about our waste center, will we be able to handle all of the drainage comfortably? Okay.
It's under the sewage treatment plant is under capacity.
Oh, good. Great. Sir, since a waiver is not required for the buffer zone, and we're talking that area up there, does that mean that it's possible that that buffer zone will not be established there?
That's certainly possible if it's not required.
Oh.
They can do it if they want, but they're not required to.
What seems to be the consensus of opinion from the designers as to whether they will do it or not?
They're gonna revise their plans. We'll see it later on.
Okay.
But, you know. Well, Mary wants to answer.
That falls under the village district guidelines. So that lot that's in that corner falls under the village district. So what they're talking about are construction and zoning guidelines, but there's a village district overlay zone that applies to lot B. So any kind of landscaping is gonna be reviewed by the village district architect. And so that's a separate review from what planning and zoning will do.
Which includes no design.
Okay, thank you.
I can address the question about buffer. Nick Ushjak, CCA, Registered Landscape Architect. We are providing planting there. It's in our plan, and it will remain there.
Okay, solves that problem.
Sorry, based on the landscape architect, sir, I was wondering if we will see a plan with the actual plantings. You indicated a number, or he indicated a number of evergreens and deciduous trees, etc. I was wondering if we will see a plan eventually with exactly what we're referring to.
Not necessarily, well, he can tell you. Not necessarily exactly, but approximately.
Oh, we currently have a landscape plan that identifies each plant and species and number. It's part of the set.
Okay. Ma'am, we should probably go to somebody else. I don't know how long.
Okay, I only have another question or two.
Well,
And
one more question, and then we'll have to go to
one
somebody
more
else.
question.
I'm not cutting her off. She can come back on, but other people need the chance.
Is there a place where the rental prices for the units are posted?
No, they're not set yet, I guess.
And when will we know what type of rental prices?
Generally, it's a leasing program that will start 3 months before the actual opening of the building.
And I just, in conclusion, I would like to say that I think that the amount of work that's been done by the commission, but especially done by all of you fine people to accommodate some of our nitpicky type personalities here, including myself, that I think this is a great idea and will be a very good benefit to our town. Thank you.
Okay. I saw your hand second. Do you wanna, you have to come over here and talk through the microphone.
My name is Lambros, and I basically have 3 questions real quick. I presume that all the parking for the tenants is underneath the buildings. Is that right?
That's what he said.
Okay, fine, because I came 10 minutes late. The second, approximately, what's
Well, there are 200 and something
Yeah,
spaces.
Yeah.
They might have guests and stuff that will park. in
yeah,
there.
well, that's okay, but basically it's taken care of under the
Basically,
building,
it's
okay?
taken care of.
Secondly, what's the approximate acreage footprint to the place? How many acres?
14.9, he said.
Okay, 15 acres roughly for the whole thing. Okay. And the last question, has there been put on the plan, you know, we have the shuttle bus in Middletown and God only knows Cromwell, wherever it goes to, Millfield, and it comes to Portland. Is there a place in the floor plan for the bus, that bus to come?
Right now, there's no bus stop per se shown in the plan, but we are going to talk to Mid-State.
Yeah, okay.
Regarding the.
To make a stop. Now, since it's such a big big place, you're going to go for one, or you're going to try 2 stops? Okay, all right, consideration. Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir, back there.
My question concerns Perry
What's your
Avenue.
name, please?
My name is James Casillo.
You wanna talk, you can talk to the microphone?
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm a little short
Okay.
here. Okay, the question is regarding the gate, the 2 entrances off of Perry Avenue and the gate that blocks the entrances. You said it was an emergency entrance. Is that gate going to be locked?
Yes.
So in an emergency, then someone has to have a key,
Yes. And they will.
and they will.
Mostly, we're talking about the fire department.
Okay. Well, and the reason why I bring that up is because of all the parking that is right there, you know, in the front of building, I think it's F and E. And, you know, we're all human and we're all the same, and it seems to me like it's easy for those people to get out from that parking area and get right onto Perry Avenue.
No, that won't happen.
That won't happen.
No, there's a gate there.
Okay, you're going to guarantee that?
He's gonna guarantee that. I don't guarantee anything. He
Okay.
will. He guarantees it.
Okay, because Perry Avenue isn't very wide.
No,
No.
you don't need to, he guarantees it.
Okay. All right. My other question is about the buildings E and F again. Did I get those letters right? Okay. You keep saying that, I think it's E is 3 stories, but when you look at it from the front of the building where the entrance is, it's 4 stories.
If you're out on Marlborough.
Right, but that's not the front of it. The front of it where the entrance is with the parking is actually 4 stories.
There's a little caveat to that, because
Well,
there's a plan that you saw with the, looking at the open part of the U on the
Yeah.
southwest corner.
That's
You're gonna probably have to go up there and, yeah.
Okay. So there was a perspective shot right here.
Right.
Looking up that way.
Mhm.
Part of the thing I referred to about moving this down here.
Right.
This will actually look mostly as a 3-story
Ing-
building here.
right, yeah.
Down to here, and then it will start.
Yeah, and probably you wanna get off to the side so people can see
Oh,
what
I'm
you're pointing
sorry.
at.
So this is, it's a good
question because it's not reflected.
Well,
in the
I'm
plan
looking
this
at-
way. No, I know, and this is what I'm trying to describe, and this is a little unusual because you touched on something that is going to change in 4 days when the next submission goes. So from here to here is 3 stories, that elevation we showed. Here, it will also look like 3 stories even to about here when we move this to that edge of the building. So it will start to get taller looking from behind around my finger here and continue down that way. So it'll look more like 4 stories down in this corner.
Yeah, 4 stories here.
Yes.
And here.
Exactly. From kind of here to here, it'll start to look like 4. And then here, it'll start at 4 and look like 5.
5.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Right. And the roof line, though.
I know, the roof line, I
was always
I
trained to
understand.
Stop talking when they flip the tape, but that's just.
I understand that the roof line is the same.
Right,
all
and
the way
that's-
through.
that is,
Right, but you mentioned also that the Brainerd house, which is over here,
This right here, yep.
right,
Yep.
it was 14 feet taller.
No, it's 40 some odd feet, and this, when you get to how you measure.
Well, you're measuring off of this side, you're not measuring off of this side or this side.
There are rules on average grades around the building. Steve can highlight them.
For the record, Steve Sullivan from
I'm not
CCA.
sure. Might be a technical answer that it doesn't address what you care about.
The
but-
14-foot reference you mentioned was the Paul Harris, the architect, asked me the elevation difference between Brainerd House and Building A.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so this is actually the biggest building. I mean, this has the bigger footprint, but this is the biggest building.
As far as
Correct?
Tallest, yes.
Yes, tallest,
Yes.
tallest building. Okay, I guess you answered my questions. I just think that the 2 buildings are huge. You're gonna see them from on the other side of the bridge. You're gonna see them when you're traveling down 66. You're gonna see them, they're gonna stick out. They're gonna be the Twin Towers of Portland. You know, and I'm not sure that this quaint little town is ready for such a big facade right there when you come into town.
Okay.
That's my concern, that's
Thank
all.
you. Who else would like to talk? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
My name is Hetty Zenowitz. I live on Joe's Pond Road.
Can you spell that for me?
HEDIZIENOWICZ. My question is any reference in any way going to be made?
You guys, could you speak?
Oh,
into the
sorry.
mic?
Any reference in any way will be made in this property to Elmcrest's history there?
I don't know the answer. to
I
that.
mean, some kind of, it played a big part in Portland's history. I think I'd like to see a little bit of it saved in there, either in a naming or something.
I'm certainly good with that idea, developing it and placing it with.
Actually, a great
Just-
spot for that would be in the gazebo. because
Yes.
It does have a handy access.
Something like that.
Sure. It would be nice. And,
Okay.
And it would also lend purpose to that gazebo than just this.
You guys have to go to
Good.
really shout loud or go to the microphone, one or the other.
Okay. Oh,
Paul Harris, Cole Harris Associates. A great location for that would be in this gazebo here, because right now it doesn't really have a purpose other than trying to mimic something else that's in town. So some sort of signage or historic plaque or something like that with a description and some old photographs would be
Okay.
great.
and my other question is regarding, during the survey, the geological surveys, or whatever they're called, when you get down to determining groundwater depth, will any pumping be necessary anywhere on here to get rid of that water before you start digging holes for the underground garages, and so forth?
It's possible. The geotechnical borings will be done in the near future, but it is possible.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
Who else would like to speak? Yes, sir. Over here.
My name is Rahul Cornejo. I recently just moved to Perry Ave, actually. Purchased my home in the end of June. And I'm a little concerned with the Twin Towers, as my neighbor James said over here in Portland. Because one, they're so big, it's a big obstruction right in front of our house. Two, the emergency exit at the end of the street, which is directly in front of my house, with the gates that you said are going to be locked. I just have a little issue with, I don't know how to say it. It's going to be like gated technology with like a key pass or something like that could fail, or just a blaring lights, shining right through the bedroom window, and also all the trees that you have planted there. I already have enough trees in my yard, making a mess. As far as upkeep and things like that for that property, for like I guess my main thing is just of the size of the buildings and just causing more traffic. We already know there's only one way out of Portland going over the bridge, and all that with employees and customers and residents is just gonna be a bigger issue. So what? I guess sorry. I guess the question would be the main concern about the traffic down Perry Ave. How would you be able to control it? Even fire trucks, the street is narrow. Once you come on the street, not every house has parking. Some cars are parked outside. I have a tough time with my Camry going up and down the street sometimes. Now you're adding a big fire truck or ambulance. That's a big issue for emergency reasons.
So what is your question?
How would they accommodate for the emergency vehicles coming down the road?
That's up to them. The fire department has to wants the exit, the entrance, so they can get to it. It'll be locked almost all the time. It's an emergency exit. Go ahead.
Also, there'll be actually less traffic on Perry Avenue because you're eliminating 14
Right. That's a good point.
on this side of the street. So there's no traffic from this site going out to Perry, so there's going to be less traffic on Perry than there is today.
Okay, yeah. Half of the streets on the left-hand sides are abandoned. So far, I think there's only a couple there that are rented, but you guys are gonna get rid of all that. And is the wall, so it's gonna be all gated, and then on the other side of the gate, you're gonna put all trees. So you're gonna have a big gate about 10 feet tall or something coming alongside.
The gate's only along the driveway cuts, so those are 24-foot wide.
So what's gonna be like from here to here?
That's landscaped. Well, as our landscape architect mentioned before, it's a mixture of evergreens and flowering trees between the driveway cuts.
So technically, like a human person from the apartments could walk, say, between the trees and come out into Perry?
We actually, between the trees and the building, we have a sidewalk on this property, so they could walk around the building, around the whole site.
Okay.
We have somebody from the fire department here to talk about. Oh, you can talk about it. Okay. You're in the fire department.
I'm not the fire department, no. Joe Balskus again, traffic engineer with Charlie, VHB. The reason for the emergency access here is in case, God forbid, something's going on to the site and they can't get into the main side drive or the drive over there. Okay, so they're not going to be used for every fire call. Hopefully there's not many fire calls, but the point being is that to have emergency access in case they can't get down Marlborough Street, Route 66. That's the reason for them. So you won't see them coming every time there's a fire call. You'll see them coming, they'll be using the main entrance, because that's the quickest way to get there. They'll only use these access for emergencies where they can't get to the site when they need to, and it's blocked for some reason. That's the reason why they'll be using those driveways, okay? Alternative, yes.
Anybody else would like, oh, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Karen Mazza, Perry Avenue. Howdy, neighbor. And I actually wanted to speak next because one of my questions dovetails on your question. Perry Avenue is a very narrow street. There are no sidewalks. There is a line of sight issue with a rise in the road. So the gated access, even somewhat sporadically being accessed by fire trucks, the remaining houses on the odd-numbered side of Perry Avenue where we live, where we own our homes, there are no sidewalks. We have children that walk to the end of Perry Avenue to access their school bus stop. They walk the length of Perry Avenue to get there on the street because there are no sidewalks. They walk the length of Perry Avenue at drop-off in the afternoon to their houses. When you're talking increased traffic on Route 66, which we all know backs up in the morning, despite our dead-end sign, cars still think maybe there's a way they can get around that traffic by coming down Perry Avenue. Maybe that dead-end sign doesn't mean anything. So that's my first concern, is cars trying to come down the street when we have that situation, and now the added concern about emergency vehicles accessing that street at a rapid pace, granted with bells and whistles, but if you have children and the timing is right, and those kids are walking to their bus stops or walking home in the street, how will that be handled? That's a concern that I have. One thing that I would like to see, you asked the developer in the reiteration of the proposal of the site plan, is for some sort of concession to protect the children on Perry Avenue, either in the form of a sidewalk for them to access and walk on from our houses on the odd-numbered side to get to and from the intersection of Route 66 to reach their bus stop, or signage. Some sort of signage beyond dead end that is much more specific, that there is no access to this development off of our street. We're all human and we all want that shortcut and we all want to get there faster. If traffic is backed up on 66, I know that I would try it. I would try to come down Perry to get in to get my coffee, to get in to my apartment, to get into that development. So I think there should be some signage that's pretty specific that there is no access to the development off of Perry Avenue. And I think that should be in conjunction with sidewalks for the children that will remain on Perry Avenue and walk to their bus stop every day. So that was my first concern. And I would like to ask the question, those gated access points for emergency vehicles, is there any scenario under which that keyed access would be given to refuse removal trucks or delivery trucks? Is it only emergency and always only going to be emergency, whether we get a grocery store or not?
Our understanding is only for emergency.
Okay.
But we can also put that as part of our approval.
I
So
would
you don't
I
have
would
to
love
worry-
to see that.
You don't have to worry about delivery
Okay.
trucks,
Okay.
using that.
But my main concern, it's less the traffic and more protecting the children that are going to remain on Perry Avenue and protect them from the cars that are going to try to shortcut down Perry, and the emergency vehicles in the event that they come roaring down Perry Avenue.
They've heard your comments
Okay.
about signage, and they will take it under
Okay.
advisement.
So
and
my
we'll see what
next
they do.
my next question is about connecting drainage and sewer lines to Perry Avenue. You yourself, Mr. Chairman, have been continually talking about the runoff and the amount of pavement in the development. Their proposal connects the runoff to Perry Avenue, which currently looks like a river on either side of the road in any rainstorm. So I don't know what the plan is for that, if anyone has looked into that. And also the sewer line. The sewer line currently only serves 14 houses on Perry Avenue. You're talking about connecting 238 apartments to that existing sewer line, unless I'm misunderstanding and that's going to be fixed or beefed up or something. Do we know that the sewer line can handle that amount of refuse coming off of this development?
I don't think we know the answer to that right now, but we
Okay.
certainly will by the time it's approved.
Good. I
because
just
the
want to
public-
share my concerns so that you have them on your radar.
Thank you.
I have a couple more.
Okay.
This buffer area in the corner that we were talking about before, when you were talking about required buffers, are you talking between retail and residential areas? Is that where?
Commercial- Yes, commercial,
Okay.
commercial and residential.
So is there a requirement for a buffer between the residential and the existing residential?
Yeah, go on. Well, he'll tell you, but the answer is yeah.
Sorry.
Nick Juszczak, CCA. There is a requirement, and we're planting that strip with evergreens and so forth. Yes.
While you're here, will there also be a gate or something, or is it just trees? Like he said, will people from the apartments be able to walk through the trees onto Perry, or will there be a guardrail or some other barrier between the apartment buildings and development and Perry Avenue?
Between the apartment buildings and Perry, there's a sidewalk on the Brainerd Place property.
Okay.
So they'll use that sidewalk to go north and south and into the.
But no other barrier besides trees between the sidewalk and Perry
Correct.
Avenue? Okay, okay. And I don't know if this is for one of you, but lighting on the development. I would like to see lighting that doesn't light up the current residential on Perry Avenue like Christmas trees all night long, that takes into consideration light pollution and best practices for development as far as impact on the environment, the ecology, and current residential. And then my last question is, with the increased traffic that was stated to increase on Route 66, we currently exit Perry Avenue without a light, and it's not easy. It's pretty much the same as a previous speaker talked about getting out of that gas station onto Main Street. I'm wondering if there's been any thought to how residents that will remain on Perry Avenue will get on and off Perry Avenue.
So again, I'm Charlie Baker with VHB. We do acknowledge it is very difficult to turn from Perry Avenue today. One thing that may provide somewhat of a benefit is the new traffic signal we'll be installing at the site driveway. It will just naturally create gaps in traffic during phase changes, so you'll see that when the light changes from red to yellow, or from green to red, there will be a natural gap in traffic that will help you turn out. Can't promise it'll fix everything, but it should provide some gaps.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
It meets all warrants, and we feel it is.
Conversation to the chair, please.
Okay. All right, and then one last thing I want to point out to the commission is that in addition to not having sidewalks on Perry Avenue for the children to walk to their bus stops and back, the current situation, they walk in the street up to the intersection with Route 66, and they wait on a grassy area that is currently part of the Elmcrest property. They cross Perry Avenue to access that grassy area, and that's where they stand and wait. That grassy area will not be there anymore. So really the scenario we're talking about once this development happens is the children, I think there might be 8 children that wait for the bus stop at various times or get dropped off at various times throughout the day. The only place left for them at the end of the street will be the street. So I just, go ahead.
Yep.
Yes,
We're
please.
proposing a sidewalk here, all along the whole frontage, so we'll have a whole sidewalk to congregate
Okay.
it.
So they will cross Perry Avenue and get on a sidewalk here?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Who else would like to speak? I don't, yes, sir.
Norm Ward, 54 Lake Road, Portland. I just have one.
You want to speak to the microphone?
just have one major concern or point. When we look at this total development, some beautiful places are being preserved. And then I saw an image of CVS pop up. It just ruined the whole, my heart went to my foot. We looked at all these beautiful, I see all these renderings, it's gorgeous. Now you're gonna see a nice home on this corner with a town front lawn up to that house, a gas station, and now a CVS. What a ruined image of your whole complex. So I heard that you might have a restaurant potential in a Sage House and maybe a restaurant potential in A. Couldn't we, I have no idea, couldn't we utilize this building for restaurants and move CVS and back to the big, I mean, for your residents and all, you still see your CVS, but it's not an eyesore for your complex and for Main Street. Everything else looks wonderful.
Thank you.
But that just jumped out like a sore thumb.
To you, me, and Paul all together. So, yeah. All I can say is we'll sick Paul on him and get everything we can out of it and come back and present it to you. It'll be something that will be specifically considered by the commission before it could get built. Okay. So, but we agree with you. We need to make it gel.
If it comes to that, we can help them with the design, so it won't look as bad to you. Well, still, sorry, they got to make a living. Anybody else who would like to talk? Yes. Hi. Hi.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Tell you another fairy tale.
Shirley Olson, 14 Russell Avenue. Shirley Olson, 14 Russell Avenue. And I have a question in relation to getting out of the property onto Marlborough Street. Is that going to be a right turn only, or are you going to be able to make a left-hand turn?
Are you talking about from Main Street?
No, Marlborough Street.
Either direction. You can go in both directions.
Not now.
No,
There's
you
a
can't.
median.
We're going to have remember, he's going to have a traffic light there.
Okay.
So
So
you'll
the
be able to
median's
go
going to
either
go?
way.
Okay.
You'll be able to go out either way.
I walk down there. I don't drive.
You'll be able to walk either way.
Okay. Everybody needs a light.
Other people will wish to talk. Hearing none, if no one else wishes to talk, we will close the public hearing.
Can we continue the public hearing?
We could, but if no one wants,
Well,
no one
we
wants to.
haven't had staff speak, and I would like to have our staff and our town consultants speak about their reviews.
They can do that, but it's not part of a public hearing.
As not part of it. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're gonna do research and do reports and all kinds of. Oh, okay. We got something else. See, you stalled long enough, Mary.
My name is Chris Taylor. I work for Nathan L. Jacobson Associates. We are the town civil engineering consultant. And I guess to follow up on Mary's comment, I would not really recommend closing the hearing. There are a number of consultants that have not had, that are doing a review and are in the process of still reviewing. And we're kind of working together to come up with a final review letter and issue those concurrently to make sure that they're not any conflicting information. I guess closing the hearing, I think that the developer both also knows that they have some revisions to make and will be submitting other material. If you close the hearing, then
Okay.
it makes it hard for people to comment on
So-
that revised material.
So.
Yeah, and we agree.
Okay. Anybody else wants to speak? All right, can I have a motion to continue the public hearing on this application until the next meeting? Is there a second?
Hold on, we have an actual official motion.
Oh, we haven't, we don't have to have a, We can we don't need this. All right, so we have a motion
Should
made.
we do that to make it official, so we don't have to redo anything?
So it's just written up to
Yeah,
continue
just-
it?
Whatever.
Yeah.
You don't need a written motion to continue
We have to choose
an
the date,
application.
though, on the
Oh,
record,
choose the
so,
date.
yes.
You have to choose the date.
So is the date on here?
It is.
The 16th.
If you want the next.
Okay, is that the 16th?
Yeah, 2 weeks from, yeah.
Go
that,
ahead.
that would be great.
Motion to continue the public hearing for application 17-06 Main Street, Marlborough Street, and west side of Perry Avenue, special permit request for a proposed mixed-use development, assessors maps 19 and 20, lots 68 to 71 and 16 to 25, zones B2, B3, TCVD, application of BRT DeMarco PTP LLC, the attached list of property owners to the November 16th to 2017 regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, the motion passes and the meeting is continued until November 16th.
I was
Last
waving
order of business.
our general counsel over.
Motion
saying,
to
I didn't
adjourn.
believe it was open.
So
I'm
moved.
glad you came
Second.
up.
We are adjourned, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.